Hello and welcome to your Tuesday edition of The Nerve. I am your host, Maureen Callahan, and oh my God, do we have a show for you guys today. First, this weekend, the final episode in CNN's three-part docuseries on JFK Jr. finally aired, and this thing, I took so much offense to this on so many levels. We are taking it apart and we're doing what we're here, what the good Lord put, or whoever your deity is, put the nerve on this planet to do. Real talk about fake people. And Carole Radziwill still has it coming. She's off gallivanting at Hotel du Cap, Eden Rock, one of the most freaking exclusive hotels in the world. And she's like posting all over social media. Like she's like the reincarnation of Lee Radziwill with her scarves and her sunglasses. And she's just, how she's subsidizing this life is beyond me. Anyway, she's got it coming. She's got it coming. And we are going to talk as well. No one's ever really heard this stuff before, and with reason. We're going to hear it today. The state of the bodies on the bottom of that ocean floor, what JFK Jr. did, the carnage he wreaked. Then let's go back to CNN and see what they have to answer for with their complete embarrassment of a docuseries. The new head of CNN should be hanging his head in shame over this, okay? We have another revelation in the And Just Like That cancellation saga. The ending of this show and the constant relitigation of whether it was a cancellation or a voluntary exit, and we all know it was a cancellation, Sarah Jessica. But it's still happening because we're still stoking the embers of that dying fire. And then, oh my God, we got so much feedback about the mini. And this was like a controversial one, and I'm into it because a lot of you guys weren't super, I don't know, you didn't fully agree with the premise. But we were all looking over at Team Nerve at all the feedback. So we're going to talk about it. It's fascinating. We've got more of your emails. So funny. We've got a celeb roundup. I mean, is this a packed show or what? And then on top of it, you guys, on top of it, my troublemakers, we have a very, very special announcement for you, a Nerve First. And, I think it's really exciting. And so we're going to save that little morsel until the end of today's show. A little dessert, if you will. Okay. Are we ready? Let's go. Are you looking to support more made in the USA manufacturing this year? Whether it's home decor, clothing, or furniture, it's become extremely difficult to find high quality products that aren't made overseas. A recent Forbes report revealed that annual earnings for small businesses across the U.S. have dropped by over 75% since 2023. Small businesses in this country are really struggling to stay afloat, and with the likes of Amazon and Target dominating the market, it's no wonder. That's where a warehouse comes in. It's your one-stop shop for artisanal, one-of-a-kind home goods. With hundreds of products to choose from, they're deeply committed to supporting American manufacturers. And their easy-to-navigate online marketplace lets you browse a wide range of independent makers. And you can feel really good knowing that your purchase supports people who are upholding transparent and ethical business practices. A warehouse believes that true luxury isn't about fancy labels or big brand names. It's about the dedication, creativity, and care that goes into every product. Help a warehouse hit their goal of supporting over 100 small businesses this year. Head to awarehouseshop.com and use code THENERVE for 15% off your first order. That's awarehouseshop.com, code THENERVE. The third and final episode of CNN's quote-unquote docuseries about JFK Jr. finally aired this weekend. And we here at The Nerve are going to talk all about the things that this episode and series either glossed over, ignored, or outright lied about. Episode 3 is titled The Final Summer, and if you were expecting an honest examination about how and why this guy was able to kill two beautiful, smart young women in the primes of their lives, come over here. Over here. Come to your mother. We will start at the beginning and end of what was left on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, the true carnage caused by this reckless fuckwit who had a death wish for the ages. But are we talking about any of that? No. Here's how we're going to start our final episode, which should really be the gut punch. This should be the thing that we are leading up to. It should give us the kick in the solar plexus and then the downward slope. That's good storytelling. Not here. CNN is not known. They're not in the business of good storytelling. Okay. So we're going to begin with an oft-told myth that if you listen to it closely enough, what these people are saying is it's our fault. It's our fault that the public adored JFK Jr. so much and gave him not just fame, unearned fame, but cultural currency he had never really earned. That's our fault. Yeah, it's us. It's the simpletons among us out here, the knuckle draggers who are like, oh, it's JFK Jr. Okay, so listen to two of John's friends, Gary Ginsberg and Steve Gillen, elucidate that point.
I never understood why he needed to take up flying. I said to him, like, John, come on. Like, I know you pretty damn well. It's not your sweet spot. And he said to me really interestingly, it's the only place where I can go where I'm left entirely alone. I love the silence. I love the solitude. It was a pure escape for him. How do you argue with that?
Well, he was a moron, so it's pretty easy.
One of the things I did not know about John was how difficult that last year of his life was. The magazine is failing. John is lying around trying to find investors. His marriage was falling apart.
JFK Jr. and new wife headed for Splitsville after just 4 months.
It seems to kind of be a typical tiff of things that go on between the two of them.
And his best friend and cousin, Anthony Roswell, was dying.
I don't know what that gossip columnist Flo Anthony was saying there. I don't know why they inserted it. She said after the fight and like the public fight we all saw in the last episode of The Nerve and the reports that after 4 months of marriage, his marriage was like gonna fall apart and they were gonna get divorced 4 months. She says, I don't know, it seemed like a typical tiff they were having. Which is it? It can't be. I don't know why she's here. She's useless. I'm sorry. She's useless. So John says to Gary Ginsberg, who's like, I'm just going to make it clear to you guys, like, I knew him pretty well. I would say to him, hey, John, I knew you pretty well. I mean, there's star fucking the corpse. I mean, there's not even a corpse, the cremains. Can you star fuck cremains? If you can, Gary Ginsberg and Steve Gillen are doing it. I mean, Carol's number one. Would never take that away from her now. He says, John said, it's the only place I can go to be alone, an airplane. What about your house? Like, what about your fucking loft? Your multi-million-dollar loft in Tribeca, or a car, or a boat, or a 5-star hotel, or a private island. I mean, there are a myriad of examples, but nope. Okay, it's got to be a fucking airplane. That's John's logic. Now, Carole, I'm going to spare you the clip, but she goes on to say, ungrammatically, again, this is another one of our bête noirs at the Nerve. She's like, I'm a New York Times bestselling author. Did you know I was a reporter? I was a reporter at ABC News. I mean, the dinosaurs may have been roaming the earth, but I was a reporter. And she goes on to say, now John is dead. And she says, in talking head interview in the CNN documentary that, quote, John will forever love flying. So she's using the present tense and she's saying, sans irony or any kind of self-awareness, John will forever love flying. Well, sweetheart, he won't, because he killed himself and his wife and her sister flying a plane he had no business flying. She also updates her narrative by telling us that John couldn't understand Carolyn because he was a, quote, very privileged male. So she's using the woke lexicon of today. He was a male. He was privileged. He was very privileged. She forgot to say white. Carole, you forgot to say white. Next time, okay, sister? But the producers are sure to tell us this is great. This is where they really shiv their subjects and they like tell us they're kind of on our side over here. They make sure to tell us that Carol's former mother-in-law, Lee Radziwill, didn't like Carolyn. So we're getting like a little truth. I don't think she liked Carol much either. Now, key to John's psyche and emotional state at this time. And CNN does a really poor job of placing us anywhere along the timeline. Like we're just supposed to understand. But if you're going to talk about the weeks and days and hours leading up to this fatal plane crash, if I'm a criminal prosecutor, I've got a timeline that's down to the millisecond, okay? Because we're building the case as to why this guy plummeted that plane into the Atlantic Ocean. So his magazine is failing, okay? And it had been failing almost since it launched. You know, people bought the first issue out of curiosity. What would it be like? JFK Jr. is sort of, finally got himself a job and he founded a magazine and apparently he's got stuff to say. He did not, okay? You need to have stuff to say if you're going to want to have a media platform, have something to say. There's another Beta Kennedy who's struggling mightily with that right now. Anyway, as discussed, George was boring and unreadable. Okay. He had to lower himself to appear on talk shows to flog this thing that nobody wanted. I guess 2 days at magazine school, the learning annex, how to start your own magazine. 2 days. I guess it didn't teach him everything he needed to know. But let's listen to Carole spinning John's hubris and entitlement, his surety that by dint of his fame, George would be a raving, unqualified, constant success that would only grow bigger and better. And Carole does so by using some very fancy millennial Silicon Valley adjacent jargon.
He was right at a crossroads of saving his magazine. I think because it was new and like anything that's new and different, people are a little skeptical and it's a startup business, right? I think people understand what that is more now. There's he was an entrepreneur.
Oh, thanks, Carole.
Business, and I think it was at an inflection point where people weren't quite sure, is this going to be something?
You can hear her literally try to speed up. She's like trying to paper over all the holes. And then she's like, well, it was a startup. It was a startup business and people understand what a startup is now more than they used to. Not so. Everybody understands what a startup is. You fuckwit. Okay. And then she's like, it was at an inflection point. She says inflection point earlier in the episode too about Carolyn. It's like this garbage language that means nothing. What kind of inflection point, Carole? Were we heading upwards or downwards? Because it was down. Okay. And, it's not our fault that nobody wanted to save this magazine because it really was unreadable and titans of the industry are going to speak a bit later and some of them are going to get honest. Not all, some. Among the ones who are not, magazine legend Tina Brown. I'm very disappointed in you, Tina. I loved Vanity Fair under your tenure. I thought what you did with the New Yorker was incredible. And I loved the Vanity Fair Diaries. I'm hoping for the New Yorker Diaries. And I was very, very disheartened to see you lower yourself in giving a tortured explanation as to why John Kennedy Jr. refused and should be forgiven for, refused to cover the biggest political scandal of the 20th century, a scandal that made Watergate look like a rounding error.
But he was also editing in the era of Bill Clinton. And the biggest story around Bill Clinton was Monica.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. Thank you.
And he didn't want to go there because he was too much of a gentleman.
Oh, he didn't want to go there because he was too much of a gentleman. A gentleman who we're talking about killing his wife and her sister. That's a gentleman. He was not a gentleman, okay? He didn't want to touch it because it was a third rail for him. And then he'd have to answer all these questions about his father's philandering, which back then, what people knew about it was really actually almost it was almost toothless. I mean, we know a lot more now, but he wouldn't have had to answer for that much. You cannot be in media and not run towards controversial topics. But okay, so Tina says that John was too much of a gentleman. Allow me, please, to read from Forever Young. Billy Noonan's New York Times bestselling book about his lifelong friendship with JFK Jr. I have it right here. Again, it's part of my library of books I used in researching and reporting Ask Not. This is from page 185. Billy and John are arguing about the Clinton Lewinsky scandal. And Billy says, you know, it's disgusting that Clinton was getting orally serviced by a young intern in the Oval Office. And John said, I quote, "Hey, Billy, I've been under that desk and there's barely enough room down there for a 3-year-old, never mind a fat ass like Monica Lewinsky." That was what John thought of Monica. Not that she was in the center of a media maelstrom or that he should try to get the first interview. Like, knock Barbara Walters out of the way. He probably could have got it. But She's a fat ass. Okay, Tina. And just a side note about this doc, you know, CNN, they devoted way too much time to the Clinton Lewinsky scandal. It is not a documentary about that, you guys. This stuff is filler. It's all filler, no killer. Literally. Next, the rightly celebrated magazine editor Kurt Anderson takes Tina's excuse out back where it belongs and shoots it squarely between the eyes before both of them are asked to read from one of John's editor's letters. Let's go.
That should have been like the story for George magazine in 1998. It just should have been. But God almighty, what a mistake. I mean, was it like, oh no, that's too undignified? Well, dude, you started this magazine that is about the undignified nature of stars and starlets and celebrity that have nothing to do with the substance of politics. Why is this the line you draw now? Are politicians celebrities? These days, politicians, like celebrities, are as newsworthy for their private conduct as they are for their public duties.
So why do we hold them to a higher standard than the other glitterati who are famous for being famous? And don't
like
tell
me,
us
George
because
Jr.
Politicians are role models. That solemn fraud is obsolete.
There is no way, first of all, no way John wrote that letter. He didn't write those editor's letters. His friend Steve here in this documentary did. And remember, as I told you guys before, he would call Stevie up at like 9:00 the night before and go, "Hey, Stevie, it's your pal, John Kennedy Jr. Hey, why don't you just do me a solid? Why don't you write my editor's letter for me? You know what? It's going to the printer tomorrow, so I need it by 7 a.m. Cool, thanks, bye." And he would do it. And there's no way in hell, I'm sorry, that John Kennedy Jr., who published rather an editor's letter that I was Steve like kind of shivving him a little bit, saying like, you know, why are we talking about politicians in the same way we talk about people who are famous for being famous without accomplishing anything, which describes John to a T. There's no way he came up with that phrase, solemn fraud. No fucking way. Sorry. Okay, so now I'm going to say we're about 25 minutes into this episode, including commercials, because I watched it on linear TV. And what are we still not talking about? What's the elephant in the room that we still haven't gotten around to? And the clock is ticking. It's our last episode. You know, I'm just going to say, I could give you 3 solid hours on that plane crash alone. That's how much uncovered stuff there is. I could do a whole hour on how awful and how utterly vile the Kennedys were to Carolyn and Lauren's mother after that crash. And since CNN won't, I will. Okay? I'll do your fucking job for you. I'm going to read the relevant passage from my book. Okay? Ask Not, the Kennedys and the Women They Destroyed. You want the real story? It's in here. Okay, page 284. Ted Kennedy, after the crash, rushed in to do damage control. He had the remains hastily autopsied, the medical examiner's report and photos sealed. I believe they were burned. Then arranged for cremation. The Kennedys had little compassion for Carolyn and Lauren's family. John's sister Caroline and her husband Ed showed not the slightest remorse or kindness to Anne Freeman. She had lost 2 of her 3 daughters. Lauren's twin sister, Lisa, was now the sole surviving child, Anne was terrified that the Kennedys would use their power to bury what remained of Carolyn and Lauren at the Kennedy family plot in Brookline, Mass. Anne wanted, that's Massachusetts, sorry for you guys who aren't in America. Anne wanted her girls close to her in Connecticut, and she needn't have worried because the Kennedys told Anne they did not care. John's remains, however, belonged to them, and he would be buried separately in Brookline. Even Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I am no fan, you guys know, was horrified. As he wrote in a diary entry, dated July 19th, 1999, the agenda for the day was to get Caroline and Anne together without intermediaries so there wouldn't be too many cooks in the kitchen. When Anne came down to New York City, however, Anne had to travel. They didn't go to her. You go to them. Caroline didn't show. Instead, she sent her husband, Ed, and Vicky Reggie, Ted's second wife. All the Bassette family knows that Ed hated Carolyn and did everything he could to make her life miserable. And we know what that's about. He probably wanted to, he probably wanted her, and he couldn't have her. Okay, so Ed hated Carolyn, made her life miserable. RFK in this entry goes on to say he bullied the shattered, grieving mother. They told her that John would be buried in Brookline and that they could do with Carolyn as they pleased. The fucking hubris. Oh, you could do with your own daughter whatever you like. We give you permission. Carol's not talking about that here in this documentary. I mean, Carolyn was her best friend, right? I mean, sister. They were like sisters, really, like family. Like, I don't want to belabor the point, but I just want to make sure because it's really important to Carol that they were not just best friends, but they were sisters. They were family. And Carolyn was like practically a Kennedy by osmosis, But if Carol's really this fucking close to Carolyn, how is she not talking about how wronged her best friend / sister wife's mother was done by the Kennedys? We don't talk about that, do we, Carol? Or why isn't Carol talking about Carolyn's real sister, her actual biological sister, Lauren, who died next to her in that plane? I guess Lauren doesn't count because she wasn't famous. She was a relative, right? I mean, Lauren, John was her brother-in-law. They were the real in-laws, not you, Carol, who's always like, John was my cousin. John was my cousin because I was married to Anthony. Carol's fucking insane, okay? She's insane. And I hope she keeps giving these interviews until her mouth, everything just gives out, because every time she opens her mouth, she makes herself look more and more ridiculous and frankly, just delusional. It is full on Baby Jane over here. Okay, we are in full Norma Desmond flower. Now, to my point. Here, Carol is going to talk about that summer of 1999 and her husband Anthony's imminent death from cancer that he had been fighting for years. Okay, it was very clear this was going to be his final summer. And you would think that would be the biggest tragedy, but it's not. Okay, so let's listen to Carol. And if you can, watch this part of the show because you have got to see the facial expressions and the emotion as it crosses her face. Here we go.
John was resigning to the fact that Anthony was likely not going to make it back to the city at the end of the summer. And then John broke his foot. That was just a disaster.
Oh my God. John broke his foot. It was a disaster. And we're looking up at the that the heavens and our tears are coming and we're reliving this trauma. John broke his foot in a wholly preventable crash. Again, he flew this thing, a contraption that all of his friends called the flying lawnmower. Everybody was like, stop going up in that thing. You're going to kill yourself. And he kept fucking doing it. And she calls it a fluke that he broke his foot. He's lucky that's all he broke. You know what the real thing that Carol's freaked out about over here is because Carolyn called her, she says, and Carolyn was freaking out because breaking his foot meant that John was going to be in a cast for 2 months. He wouldn't be able to walk or run or bike around town or rollerblade or bicycle with his rollerblades on. Like we know he liked to do, that idiot. And if he couldn't move around, he'd be a nightmare. She'd be stuck with this guy at home all the time. And he'd be like crawling out of his skin like an addict because he had like ADHD and he couldn't sit still. He couldn't be inside his own mind for 1 fucking second. If you're telling me the guy liked flying so he could sit alone with his own thoughts and really think through stuff, that guy didn't think for a second. He didn't have any deep thoughts. He didn't know himself. He didn't care to know himself. He was famous. He was hot. What's the point? Okay, now. John goes on Larry King Live. I don't know how many times he went on, but CNN is really making a meal out of this. They're just making a meal out of all of their own archival footage. You would think that CNN was the only news outlet that covered John Kennedy Jr. So Larry asks John the question, are there downsides to being you, to having your name and your legacy? Now watch closely. Again, this part of the show I would implore you to watch because John's micro expressions tell the truth. His micro expressions are the real feeling. And you can tell, no pun intended, Larry hit a real nerve here.
There are other days you say, I wish my name were David.
No, I'm pretty happy with what it is. I mean, if you're asking if it's hard being me,
it's brought you a unique life.
Absolutely. And great opportunities and some challenges. But all in all, I feel very fortunate. So it's not so bad.
That was the party line. But you can tell the guy, again, as I said, had zero introspection because Larry asked that question, which I don't think any of his friends ever asked him. Like, I don't think they ever sat down and really had real heart-to-hearts because they were all, no matter how long they knew him or how close they got, they were all still in awe that they knew JFK Jr. So you see John's face, like you see his is it his left eye? It like twitches a little bit and he gulps a little bit. Like it's small, but there's like 2 gulps. And he goes back like that. And like, you can tell, it's like, yeah, what would life be like if I could just, I don't know, what would it like to be like a normal person? You know, that for him was like as far afield for any of us knowing what it's like to live in that kind of a fishbowl. Now, Carole lets something else slip, and I don't think she recognizes its magnitude, okay? Listen to this.
John was also trying to save his magazine. And Carolyn was trying to help, but then like being frustrated at him because he wasn't acknowledging at that point in the beginning of the summer that Anthony was dying and that he needed to focus and spend time with Anthony.
So what she's really saying, and I don't even think Carole realizes this either because she's as deep as like a fucking kiddie pool, that is how selfish and narcissistic and childish and entitled America's Prince really was, okay? And I write about this in the book. If he didn't want to deal with something, even the imminent death of a cousin he adored and considered a brother, he just didn't deal with it. He didn't deal with it. He didn't want to. He didn't have to. He didn't care. Nobody ever held him to account except his mother, and she was dead, okay? There was no thought that John gave to what Anthony may have needed or wanted from John during that time while he is facing down his imminent mortality and knowing he would not make it out of that summer alive. And Anthony was only 40 years old when he died. That is young. But that's the Kennedys for you. They're so fucked up. This documentary, again, would have you believe that this is American royalty. And listen, we're hearing from the people who are in the inner circle, like No, we're not. We're not. Carol's as close as it maybe gets. But I do think, again, she was limited. She was on a need to know basis, and so Anthony is emaciated, scars all over his body. He dies 3 weeks after that plane crash. And RFK Jr. wrote about both of the funerals in his diaries. Now, again, this is how fucked up it is when you're a Kennedy. This is where your head's at. I'm not saying all of them, but like RFK Jr. in his diaries wrote about, first, obviously, because this happened first, John and Carolyn unexpectedly, and Lauren, pre-deceased Anthony. He writes about how the streets of New York City were lined with thousands of mourners, like people, just strangers who didn't know John or Carolyn, and the hordes of the media. And anytime they tell you they don't like it, they're lying. They love it. He couldn't believe it. He was like, whoa, like the world's media is here for John and Carolyn. All right, we got to show their lives mattered. That's the only metric, right? Is the media outside your door? And then he writes about Anthony's service like three and a half weeks later out in East Hampton, which was so much smaller, and there was no press. The press didn't care, and they don't come out here unless they're invited. So, but that was the takeaway for Bobby Jr., that John and Carolyn, even in death, drew the bigger crowd. Okay. Anyway, so back to the final weeks at George. Okay. Those final weeks at George magazine before he dies, and everyone knows this magazine is circling the drain. And again, this is a huge humiliation for John, because this magazine was only a couple of years old, and it, like, nobody wanted it. He's flying all over the place he flew to Canada. Nobody wanted to buy this thing. You know what he was realizing, though? They all just wanted to say they had taken a meeting with JFK Jr. and had met him. That's what his life was coming down to. This realization that he was a pretty face and he was famous and everybody wanted a little piece of him, but were they going to fund his shitty magazine? No, because it was shitty. So everyone admits, finally, we're telling some bits of truth here. Carolyn, who had quit her job at Calvin Klein, I don't know why she did that. She had been offered, reportedly at the time, and it makes total sense, big jobs over at Harper's Bazaar when Liz Tilberis was running it. It was great under Liz. Or from Anna Wintour, want to come work for us? Like, we'll give you a high salary and a high title. You could be a stylist. You could be a consultant, whatever. She would have been out of the house. She would have been doing something, but she wasn't. She was sitting and marinating in her own stew, her own resentments. She was so famous now. People wanted to know what she was wearing all the time. Anyway, Carolyn takes it upon herself to insert herself into the goings-on at George magazine. And she's always coming up there, going into the editorial meetings and giving her unsolicited opinions and making decisions on editorial. And okay, so this is the best analogy. She's just his wife. She doesn't have a role there. And John let her do this. Okay, he let her do this. Could you imagine going to your job? You go to your job today or tomorrow, and suddenly your boss's spouse is there. Your boss's spouse, who is otherwise unemployed and was not part of your job interview, was not part of this deal. And suddenly she's at your desk and she's saying, hey, you know what you need to do? Do it this way. Do that. Kill this. I say this. Call this person. You'd be like, what? That's how chaotic it was. That's the magazine that John Kennedy Jr. was running. Something fucking chaotic, out of control. Even Gary Ginsberg in this documentary calls her a, quote, total pain in the ass at George to many, many people. That means the whole staff, okay? It was entirely dysfunctional. And I really wish at the time people had leaked this to Page Six and reported it, because this magazine, this is the kind of leadership that JFK Jr. was exhibiting. And he was going to use George magazine to springboard into national politics so that he could be president of the United States someday. We all deserve to know what kind of leadership he was really exhibiting over there. Now, here is some of just the brutal truth about the state that George was in shortly before JFK Jr. crashed that plane.
David Pecker, the CEO of Hachette, would put John on the cover every day with his shirt off. That's the magazine they wanted.
Say you have a fight, Michael, over the next cover.
Let's say
his business partner.
For today.
Advertisers then renegotiated their fees. George was not getting the amount of money that he was getting before. Michael was hearing this from the advertisers. It's not distinctive enough. We wanted a magazine that had more John in it. And so Michael's getting that pressure. And then their own personal dynamic changed, especially when Carolyn comes into the office and starts getting involved in some editorial issues.
So John isn't going to play ball and make a distinctive magazine that has more of him in it. Honestly, it wouldn't have mattered because John was not a distinctive person. That's the sad truth. And Michael, according to everybody here, Michael Berman, who's on CNN with John, they're not even in the same room, by the way. Like Michael's remote and John's in studio, and they were really at odds. And when Larry says, "Oh, do you guys have fights?" and Michael's like, "You mean today?" And John's like, "Yeah, we had like 4 today," and they're laughing, but that was just the tip of the spear about how bad it was. And it got so bad, so dire that John and Michael wanted Carolyn out of there, rightly, out of there. Here they are again on Larry King, begging people to subscribe to their magazine, begging. You're not going to believe it. You're going to hear Michael. You're going to listen to this.
People call 316-8735. They'll be able to get a subscription to George.
An 800 number, did you think it would come to this?
Spoken like a true publisher.
They're giving out the subscription phone number on primetime television because they have to beg. They're fighting for their lives there. Okay, now on to the fight. The fight between John and Michael, which gets physical. In a magazine, at a magazine, this fluffy magazine. Let me tell you, I have worked in many newsrooms, the New York Post being the toughest by far. And I saw a lot, but I never, ever, ever saw anything like this.
His battles with Michael Berman culminated in a shoving match where John ripped Michael's shirt. Michael chased John across the floor of George magazine. And when John went into his office, Michael was trying to pick the lock to get in. It was really an explosive relationship.
How are things at the magazine? We had a big power struggle there last time we talked, right?
No, I mean, I think we had, what's the term of art, creative differences.
I believe the fights that took place at George were about the editorial. They were really having fights up there every day, physical fight.
John says, "What's the term of art I'm looking for?" I've never heard that phrase, term of art. I think he's looking for either turn of phrase or what's the saying, but then he's like, it's created, and you can tell he's lying. Can you imagine? And I don't think, Steve, that Michael, after ripping off part of John's shirt, or John rips part of Michael's shirt and then John runs away and Michael runs after him. And this is, by the way, they're working with adults. You know, they could have like knocked a woman down. John was a big guy. You know, this is what this is what magazine professionals are having to deal with. And then John locks himself in his office and then Michael starts picking the lock. No. Michael starts banging on the door and trying to break it down. That's what would happen. It would escalate. It wouldn't suddenly be like, oh, let me see if I can borrow a bobby pin from like Tina in admin. See if I can delicately pick this fucking lock. Get out. Now, Gary Ginsberg calls it in this documentary, their relationship, a quote, fucking disaster. And that when John was mad, quote, he would be raw. So now we're getting to a little bit of real truth about John. So we're talking about the kind of mad, I'm asking, where John, say, physically assaults his fiance, as we saw him do to Carolyn in the park in the last Nerve, or the Nerve where the last two Nerves ago. You know what I'm talking about. The kind of mad where he takes his hand, his open palm like this, and shoves her back by her face. Like that kind of mad? Is it the kind of mad where he could get into a plane he had no business flying and kill his wife and her sister? Is it that kind of mad? That makes for a great story. And CNN purports to be a news network, but they're not going to go there. They're not going to go there. Now, Steve goes on to talk about a very telling night in which he was over at John and Carolyn's Tribeca loft. John had just received a letter from Hachette, the company that was publishing George, and John, it seems, was having trouble decoding it. And, you know, Steve does not get into the guts of this letter, but I know the guts of this letter. And this letter basically said, John, you're lazy, you're stupid. We think your stewardship of this magazine has been for shit, and we're done. Okay, it was the ultimate fuck around and find out / breakup letter. But John was having trouble getting it through his thick fucking skull, so he asked Steve to come over and read it and give his opinion. Okay, here's what Steve had to say about that night.
He was down. He was tired. He had just gotten a letter from his shit that shook him up. And he said, why don't you come back to the apartment? And I want you to read the letter and give me, fresh eyes. And Carolyn comes in and she's smoking a cigarette. She's wearing a Columbia University oversized sweater. And I'm trying to read the letter. And she's like, John, everybody you, John. You let everybody you. You got to start people back, John.
These two, John and Carolyn, were the emotionally mature brain trust running George because Michael Berman had left or was forced out. But everyone who would know says here in this doc that once Michael left, that's when the magazine fell apart in every way. And this was a problem. This was a real problem. And Steve outright says it here. John needed this magazine to succeed because then he could become president, and, quote, believed John that he was the heir apparent, even as the media kept slavishly reporting that John was just a really nice, humble guy who didn't really have that kind of vaulting ambition. He wasn't planning on becoming president. No. What else would he do with himself? This whole thing is disgusting. It is so sick. This lie that CNN is insisting on pumping back into the American bloodstream is fucking sick. And we here at The Nerve exist to destroy it. Now, finally, we get to the crash. Carol, remember, she is the most intellectual housewife to ever do it, helpfully tells us that the crash made headlines all over the world. And still, she didn't see Tyler Henry coming? Okay. Listen to Carolyn's friend Hamilton talk about John being a good pilot, but that Hamilton refused to fly with him again. And watch Hamilton's body language, because Hamilton is telling us one thing, but his body is literally like torquing away from the camera. He's like, I mean, yeah, he was a great pilot. How far back can I get? The guy was really good in the air. Okay. Here he begins with where he was the morning that the crash broke, and he goes into it.
I was in Connecticut. I was supposed to have been with them that weekend, but I'm a nervous flyer, and I flew enough times with John. I think John was a very good pilot, but the idea of like those little planes going back and forth with him, I'd done it enough and thought never again.
So he flew with John, and trust me, if John Kennedy Jr. hadn't been John Kennedy Jr., none of those people would have ever gotten in a plane with that guy at the helm, ever. And he says there, I did it, and then I was finally like, never again, never again. Then we see dramatic footage of the search and rescue mission, which was really, really a search and recover mission. And the Coast Guard is deployed, and that, by the way, we paid for that. The American taxpayers paid for all of that. Stuff that would never have been deployed had that been Joe Schmo, okay? All these serious resources, military resources were diverted needlessly. The Navy sent divers, okay? These serious resources are needlessly diverted because this fuckwit, this loser was, in my opinion, and I think it's a very well-founded one, he was on a murder-suicide mission that night. And if you think that's hyperbole or too harsh, allow me, again, I'm going to read the section from Ask Not. I'm going to read it because you're not going to believe it. Okay, here we go. Before John's scheduled takeoff, 4 other pilots had not been able to land at the Essex County Airport where he was taking off that evening without using their instruments. The haze was getting so thick that one pilot decided not to take off that night. Visibility was only about 4 miles, and none of that pilot's friends were willing to get in his plane. John, hobbling on his crutches around his 6-seat Piper Saratoga, took off at 8:38 p.m., again, defying one of aviation's most basic rules, filing a flight plan. Once in the air, he defied another and cut off all communication with air traffic control. It was the pilot of American Airlines Flight 1484 with 128 passengers and 6 crew members aboard. Sorry, I had said in an earlier episode, it was closer to 200 passengers, something like that. It's 128 passengers, 6 crew. It was the pilot who averted one disaster that night. A small Piper Saratoga had climbed above its designated airspace. This was John. In the air less than 20 minutes, now on a collision course with a commercial airliner. John was oblivious. Ground control alerted the American Airlines pilots 8:52 p.m. Ground control to American 1484. Unverified, appears to be climbing. The pilot's radio back. We're looking. Ground control. Yes, I think we have him here. Pilots, I understand he's not in contact with you or anybody else. Ground control. Nope, not talking to anybody. It was those pilots who saved that plane from getting smashed into by JFK Jr. But now we got to hear from this dolt, CNN's useless DEI hire Leah, who tells us that this story, the crash, the sanitized version of the crash, but the crash in the immediate quote became something that everyone in America was aware of. Steve tells us of his dawning realization that Saturday morning that they were all, John, he's the only really important one here, that John was dead. And Carol ends this SOT with her own realization.
As the day went on, the big thing was that John's sister, Caroline, called George and told him to tape up John's office. And that's when we kind of knew that it was over.
The Transportation Safety Board has just made it official. At the wreckage site, the divers successfully located the bodies of John F. Kennedy Jr., Carolyn Bassette Kennedy, and Lauren Bassette. Now,
it was so cruel for Anthony to have to watch that. John and Anthony, they were real brothers. And all I could think of is like, I'm the only one left.
Carol, your husband was still alive. He was right there next to you. I'm going to presume watching this 24/7 news coverage, which is what it was. All of cable news that weekend, they had their story and they were getting off on more Kennedy tragedy porn instead of looking into the real story. But Carol's dying husband is sitting there and she's like, I'm the only one left. They're gone. They're all gone. Now, if Carol was really interested in being honest, I'm going to be honest. This is what I think was really going through her mind. It's over. It's over for her. Okay. Anthony, she was totally expecting him to die. That was a given. And she was fine with it. Remember, we went to Tyler Henry and we wanted to talk not to Anthony, but to Carolyn, her true love. Like, hurry up, Anthony. What's the problem? Just get it over with. So I can run I can run along with John and Carolyn where I can be subsumed into the ecosystem and maybe she could get Carolyn for herself, but this meant these two dying. Again, we don't mention Lauren. Carole Radziwill never mentions Lauren. Fuck her. Fuck Carole Radziwill. Carol, which she's really mourning here and is still experiencing complicated grief over, trust, is that she is no longer a Kennedy adjacent +1. She is no longer potentially on the invite list up at the Cape for the clam bakes, what have you. Manhattan's most exclusive VIP rooms and secret societies have, been closed to her forever. And she can't get over it. She was this close. She was this fucking close. That she wouldn't be on Bravo. Carolyn had lived and John had lived. That she thinks she'd be in the White House. She probably thinks she'd be on the cabinet. That's what she's in his cabinet. That's what she's really mourning here. She would be JFK Jr. in her mind because she was such a credentialed reporter back when like dinosaurs were giving pressers. JFK Jr. would have installed her as his press secretary at the White House. That's what she thinks. That's what she pretends like on her loneliest, lowest days, like in the bathroom mirror. Fox News, I won't take your question. Over here, NPR, please. Now, here's where we get to the nerve state admission, real talk about fake people. We never discussed what condition those bodies were in, what JFK Jr. did that night, and we have to because it completely obliterates the kind of fantasy, the bullshit fantasy that CNN is shilling over here. And it's the fantasy that the Kennedys insist upon, that and it allows for a continued communal just adoration of this family. It's why the phrase American royalty is still stuck in the lexicon, and we got to get it out. We have to get it out. And this is the way. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to warn you, this is very graphic, very graphic. We are going to hear from a former Navy diver called Joshua, who says that he was on the dive team that recovered Carolyn, Lauren, and John's remains. He appeared on the Marco Rudo Exchanges podcast 9 months ago. How this thing didn't make blazing headlines is beyond me. His interview so far has almost 500,000 views. And what's telling to me is that nobody's, by the way, YouTube, if the Kennedys reach out to you and say, take it down, please do not. I mean, I think this guy's telling the truth. I spoke extensively to this amazing guy, Bobby. He's in my other book, American Predator. He used to head the dive team for the FBI out of LA. And he walked me through front to back how a dive team works. And this guy, Joshua, sounds totally legit to me. And it's a very small community, the people who do these recoveries, because they experience traumas. They see things down at the bottom of the ocean that nobody should ever have to see. So, and I say this also to make it clear that none of the families have so far sued regarding this podcast or the information that Joshua revealed in this interview. So we are going to begin. We're going to do 3 bites of this. We are going to begin with his description of the condition of the bodies. And again, this is graphic. Here we go.
We saw him face fronted into the cockpit, and then we could see the blonde hair girls in the rear seats. Everyone's still seatbelted in. We recovered the 3 bodies. One detail was that JFK Jr.'s legs were, some people will say they were inside of him from impact. Fortunately, we found the kneecap in the cockpit dashboard, so that doesn't really happen when something goes inside of you. So they were very mangled, almost like a tin can just twisting on human flesh. It just cuts you up, tears you up. But yes, they were still seatbelted in. So we actually had to remove via cutting the seatbelts to then unfold the seats and unfold some metal a little bit to get them out. We put all 3 bodies into actual body bags down there and kept them on the side where we stored all the other stuff that we found on the plane in this like sort of cage on the bottom. But yeah, they were horribly mangled. It was very, very kind of distorted to see. They had been down long enough to where the water has kind of been soaking into them a little bit, kind of puffy, kind of look to them.
So imagine that, okay? And the front of that plane, I've seen the NTSB photos. They're out there. If you want to see them, you can see them. It was completely shattered, almost into nothing. So basically, what Joshua was being a little too polite to say is that the flesh of the bodies themselves had meshed with the metal on impact. And they had to take it apart underwater to get whatever of the remains they could get. And that's right. They put the body bags in there. They put them in the body bags underwater to keep the media from ever getting an image. Joshua also talks about what else they recovered from the plane, which is salient. So listen to this.
But I mean, they were going to a wedding, I believe, so they had a lot of personal items. I mean, from Guns N' Roses CDs, he had just broken his leg previously, so he was still kind of utilizing crutches. We found the set of crutches down there.
The crutches. He couldn't fucking walk without crutches. He had just gotten his cast off. The crutches were down there. God, what I wouldn't have given for the media to have a photo of that. Joshua is asked now, it's 25 years later, is he able to talk about other things that he saw down there, things that not even the families might know? I believe here the questioner means the Bassette family, because Ted Kennedy knew everything. I'm sure of it. It's Ted who raced up there and took control of everything. And it's Ted who had all of those remains cremated very hastily. I don't even think he consulted with the Bassette family, because if he had, we would have known. And the autopsy report disappeared forever. I am sure it was burned. I am sure it was burned. So Joshua says, yes, he does have a very critical detail. And he is describing, he's describing the divers on the bottom are in constant communication with the dive team leaders who are up above on any given vessel, okay, or any given surface. So he's talking about a key piece of evidence that was a body part that has never before been reported, and it's Carolyn's.
One of the biggest, maybe items that were, let's say, not recovered were when we were just about done taking care of the whole work site. We got probably, I would say, 95% of the wreckage that was down there. One of the very, very last divers, even after they did the burial at sea, so bodies cremated, kind of, said your farewells, we found, I'd probably say, a quarter size of a scalp of blonde hair that had been wrapped around her umbilical. And so, you're kind of putting your hose away to be done with the dive. And one of the divers said, topside, I have, this substantial size scalp down here. And at one point, everyone was kind of like, well, what do we do? It's, make a decision. And basically just the topside diver said, no, you didn't.
No, you didn't. And Joshua goes on to say that diver released the scalp and it floated away. No, you didn't. That's why the nerve is here. And that's why I wrote Ask Not. And that's why I'll continue to bang this drum with all of you. Yeah, you did. Yes, you did. Up next, we're going to get lighter. We're going to put some air back. It's going to be great fun. We're going to be reading all of your feedback, your emails. We're going to talk a little bit about your reaction to the mini, and then we're going to do a really fun celeb roundup and our big announcement. We are back in a minute. Today's episode is sponsored by OneSkin. Their OS1 peptide is the first peptide specifically proven to target zombie cells. What are zombie cells, you ask? These are the dysfunctional senescent cells that cause lines, wrinkles, and thin, crepey skin. What's great about using OneSkin products? The simplicity. Just clean your face, then use the eye cream. That's it. Free from over 1,500 chemicals and preservatives that can make skin red, irritated, or itchy, their products are certified safe for sensitive skin, dermatologist tested, and approved by independent testing platforms like SkinSafe. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. By focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. For a limited time, you can try OneSkin with 15% off using code NERVE at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code NERVE. After you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. So please support your show here and tell them that we over here at The Nerve sent you. Give your skin the scientifically proven gentle care it deserves with OneSkin. We are back, and it is time for Troublemaker, feedback, email, etc. We begin with the biggest loser response. And I want to say, I saw a lot of it on our YouTube feed, and I saw you guys really having very strong reactions and agreeing and disagreeing. And, what I love, and you guys remark upon it all the time, is that it never gets nasty, though. It never gets vicious. There's never name calling or back and forth. And it's just such a testament to this entire group that we've got going. I'm really, really, really into it. Okay. Hi, Maureen. My name is Ariel. I see the comment section. I want you to know that there are those of us out there who agree with you and appreciate you shedding light on The Biggest Loser without bashing the past contestants. I used to be one of those judgmental people who couldn't understand how someone could, quote, let themselves get that huge. Some of those contestants were 400 to 500 pounds. I've never personally struggled with my weight and made no attempt at trying to empathize with the contestants. I now understand that food addiction is real, and those who struggle with it deserve just as much compassion as we give to alcoholics and drug addicts. Food addiction, in my opinion, is actually enabled by society. Obesity has been glorified in recent years thanks to the woke ideology. Healthy whole foods often cost more than ultra-processed foods. True. Many working people don't have the time to make a home-cooked meal. True. The cost of living is so ridiculous that even those making a decent wage have to work multiple jobs, and foods are intentionally engineered to be addicting, especially with sugar, to keep people buying more. True, true, and true. Big agra, big food, they lace a lot of their product with stuff that like gets your brain rewired. So it's like you're never feeling full and you can't stop eating whatever they've packaged up. Like it's real. It's real. They have a lot to answer for, just like big tobacco had a lot to answer for. And we haven't even touched on food deserts. You could, if you're not well off, if you're a poor person in America, you're living in a food desert. You don't have a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's to go to. Okay. I feel like this show preyed on the weak and took advantage of very vulnerable people. It's easy for many to dismiss the struggle with obesity as just a pathetic lack of willpower. I would argue that those people come from a place of privilege and have never known the nightmare of food addiction. To another email, this one from Julie. Hi, Maureen. Hearing these stories about The Biggest Loser made me think of my time serving in the U.S. Army. Thank you for your service, Julie. I joined when I was 17, went through basic training. I knew it was going to be hard and challenging. Drill sergeants yell at you while training, push you further than you thought you could go yourself, but they are highly trained and look for medical issues with incoming trainees. They know how and when to push someone, and they also know when to back off. I am 40 now. I served in Iraq and am a registered nurse. It is sad to see these men and women treated so terribly. It makes me ask, where was the teaching and training that should have been a priority? Jillian and Bob, as well as the producers of the show, were not interested in helping these obese people. Again, this is Julie's email. I wanted to believe that the show was teaching a new lifestyle and healthy mindset habits. It turns out it was an opportunity to embarrass and further hurt them. I hope the participants find healing and joy again. From Patricia in Brookhaven, New York. Maureen, The Biggest Loser was on TV for a long time. How could the contestants feign surprise at the severity of the regime? If I were close to someone who wanted to participate, I would tell them to watch the show. They worked those contestants out like beasts. They wanted the money and exposure. And Suzanne Mendonca, who was a guest on our mini, this Troublemaker, Patricia says, is a perfect example. She's a bright woman and she knew what was involved. She comes on your show all glammed up. She's addicted to the fame. Listen, I don't think Suzanne would say, hey, I wasn't into like being on TV. I think she was pretty open, like she wanted to be on TV. That's not a sin. I would say, though, to those of you who are maybe blaming or assailing or skeptical of the contestants who said, I was abused on that show, I gained all my weight back, I really struggle, I was harmed. I think the real people that you should be asking those questions of are the network executives, the producers, and the trainers. Why were they doing the show? Why were trainers in particular, who you would think know better, doing the show? Bob Harper says in this doc, we all know that the only way to lose weight is through your diet. exercise is not the way. But this made great TV. So I would say the trainers I guess they really wanted to be famous and rich and wealthy that badly. I think they have a lot to answer for. Okay, quick. This is a really fascinating one. This is from someone, and I believe that there are people who have the gift, who are very dialed in to other dimensions or are extreme empaths. And I believe it. I do. I'm a very logical person, but I do believe it. This is from a troublemaker named Mark. Hello. I recently came across The Nerve, and while I may not 100% agree with your position on everything, that's still allowed, I hope. Allowed and welcomed. It makes stuff interesting. It makes life interesting, does it not? I find your presentation to be very refreshing. In short, as a gay man, your personality is such that I would definitely be down for drinks and dish. High praise indeed. Now, he's taking issue, Mark is, with my takedown of Tyler Henry, who I do believe is a charlatan. Okay, I think he's a bad actor in both ways, both senses of the word. But Mark says, just for a little enlightenment, but psychic ability or not, it's really hard to read yourself. I don't do it professionally, but the minute someone lets it leak that I have the capability to read people, I'm inundated with calls, making it a parlor trick, and my heart sinks. When you're not doing it, that's your downtime. You know who would relate, Mark? And I know you know the way in which I mean this. Alison Dubois, Beverly Hills Season 1, Dinner Party from Hell. It's like having a paid job where you're expected to clean all day, then go home and clean out your own refrigerator. Nobody wants to do that. So you generally don't. You get someone else to do it. I have an empath friend who I visit on occasion to give me a quote tune-up. Hairdressers and stylists don't do their own hair 9 times out of 10, and neither do empaths or psychics. Terry, as evidence for your take on Jennifer Aniston, TMZ reported this little tidbit back in 2006 during the promotion of the indie film Friends with Money. Joan Cusack says that she was sick of all of the hoopla surrounding Aniston's personal life. This is a show called Confessions of a Chauffeur. This was a celebrity chauffeur who was escorting Jennifer Aniston and Joan Cusack around Sundance the same year. Cusack told the driver that even though she's a celebrity, she's a private person, Cusack, and able to live a, quote, nice, normal life. The driver says Cusack put it this way, quote, it's a choice an actor makes. The comment wasn't specifically directed at Aniston, but the implication is certainly there. Hello, Maureen. I heard that Barry Weiss has the free press on the market for $250 million. She's reportedly currently in talks with CBS, Troublemaker. I don't know if you knew that. Unbelievable to me. I read the New York Times every day, and when she was writing for the Times, I didn't find her particularly interesting. What's up with this alleged sale of her media empire? Okay, I have a personal story about this. So I was told when Ask Not came out last summer, it was like a total natural fit for what they're doing over at the Free Press. And I was a fan of it. And I was like, hey, I'll write you guys an original piece. Like, you know, and I did. And like, I gave them this pitch and I could never get any traction. I was later told by an insider that Barry has a real prejudice against people who didn't go to Ivy League schools. And so for someone who's so smart, she's like incredibly blinkered, because it's like if you have an Ivy League degree, like you're in, it doesn't matter if like you were a legacy or a dummy. Like John Jr. went to an Ivy. But, you know, and then I also know that she is very taken with all the attention she gets from billionaires. And she'll go into the office and brag about what billionaire's house she was over the night before, having dinner with, and then blowing smoke up her ass. Like, she's so great. She's such a brilliant person. She's like, and you know, things aren't going well over there, and it's reflected in the products because it has, like, George Magazine become unreadable, and that's just the truth. Okay, no sour grapes. Like, I can live fine without ever being published in the Free Press. I'm much happier over here. I'm just saying, like, there's a reason. And then we got a lot of great feedback on Sam Vaknin, who will be back. And finally, Troublemaker Paul. This may be the third time, Paul. We're developing something of a back and forth. Paul from New Zealand, who submitted another email about the Troublemaker art we showed on our last full Nerve, which included something Paul cooked up for us. And Paul says the magazine mock-up covers of me and just like that, ready, my version of that hat are exquisite. Bet they didn't teach that degree of talent at magazine school. Paul, you crack me up. Crack me up. He says he's getting on to another version of another work of art he's going to send our way. I can't wait to see it, Paul. And he says the bar has been set very high, and I completely agree in the best way. Okay. Next up, we have a celeb Nepo baby who we're putting out an all points bulletin. We're putting out 911, avoid. This kid is a danger to women everywhere. Just my opinion. We're going to be really getting into it. We have some revealing info from the costume designer for And Just Like That. And then we have a big announcement. Our drum roll. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, first, a quick reminder. Keep your emails coming. You can reach me at Maureen at devilmakehairmedia.com. You can DM me on Instagram at Maureen Callahan Writer or at The Nerve Show. And remember, like, subscribe, and spread the word. We are growing this community of troublemakers so far and so fast that it's getting us someplace we didn't think we would get to for months. And that is our big announcement. So we will see you in a minute. If you love olive oil, like I love olive oil, I have to clue you into Farm Fresh. Your first taste will be a revelation. Born of earth and tree, Farm Fresh olive oil is bright, vivid, grassy. It's like a garden in a bottle, and it adds amazing flavor to all of your meals. Listen, if we insist, as we should, on fresh milk and eggs, fresh meat and fish, fresh fruits and veggies, in every case, freshness makes a huge difference in flavor and nutrition. This is also true of olive oil, but you'll never find fresh olive oils in supermarkets where they can sit on the shelf for months or even years. Prove the difference to yourself with a free $39 bottle direct from an award-winning artisanal farm. Pay just $1 to help cover shipping, and your $39 bottle is free, courtesy of TJ Robinson, known worldwide as the olive oil hunter. TJ searches the world for the best tasting olive oil and ships it direct at peak farm fresh flavor and nutrition. So try your first bottle free with no obligation or commitment to buy anything. For your free $39 bottle, go to farmfresh222.com. That's farmfresh222.com, farmfresh222.com. We are back. Now, the first thing we need to address is a young guy in New York City named Mingus Reedus. He is the son of the supermodel Helena Christensen and the actor Norman Reedus, who many of you know from The Walking Dead. Mingus Reedus, I think it was last year, was arrested for punching a woman at a festival, at like a fair in New York City. A strange woman, a stranger to him. Not a strange woman, a stranger to him. So he was arrested for that. And then he was just arrested a day or so ago for assaulting his girlfriend. And in the report I read, the girlfriend said that he was strangling her, and he was so violent that as he was strangling her, this was the report, he lifted her off of the floor. He's currently out on bail. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, if you see this guy, he is escalating, and it is a matter of time before he kills a woman. A matter of time. And if his parents want to pretend that this is just a misunderstanding, or he just needs some therapy, or he's got a drug problem, but this isn't him and he'll never do it again, they can't say they haven't been warned. Okay? Now, moving on to happier things. The costume designer for And Just Like That gave an interview to Decider magazine, which ran over the weekend. And she said that she did not know, she had not been told, neither had the whole costume department, that the show was ending. And this to me is more evidence that I submit to you as your prosecutor that HBO canceled this show, despite what SJP and Michael Patrick King claim. They claim otherwise. They're such artists over there. They voluntarily pulled the plug. Not so. And this is why, and Tim, the makeup artist, will back me up on this, I'm sure. Costuming is a major way you tell the story. It is another layer of storytelling. So it's very important that the costume designer is keyed in to all of the key beats of the show and all of the major developments and how they're going to begin, what the middle is, and what the end is. So you're a liar, Sarah Jessica. Just my opinion. You're a liar. You can't take the humiliation. Your ego is way too fragile. Okay? Sarah Jessica Parker is so delulu. She is so out of her mind. She still thinks that people love her and think that she is a fashion icon and that we're not all laughing at her and that hat. The Holly Hobby on acid hat. We laughed. We're still laughing at you, Sarah. She's in this Post article that's, I think they picked it up from somewhere else, but she's taking credit for the hat and the hat going viral. And she's saying this is how out of her mind she is, that she had a fight with Matt. She went to the mat with Michael Patrick King. She left blood on the floor because he was like, that hat's bullshit. That hat is ridiculous. And she was like, no, this hat is high fashion. And I, Sarah Jessica Parker, I'm the arbiter of fashion. Sarah Jessica in her mind thinks she's like waiting by the phone. She's got her iPhone is never on silent mode because what if Condé Nast calls and says, you know what, Sarah? You should replace Anna Wintour as the editor-in-chief of Vogue. You know it. She's out of her mind. Okay. Finally, I wanted to end today's show on a note about an obituary I read this morning. I had never heard of this guy before, but these people are a dying breed and I love them. And I want to pay tribute to a guy named Sterling Lawrence. He died at 82 years old, book editor with an eye for bestsellers. This is in the New York Times and it's a lengthy obit. He had an eye for talent. He found Michael Lewis. And so Michael Lewis, and he found also Sebastian Junger, who he read the article that Sebastian wrote for a magazine in The Atlantic, and it became the book, The Perfect Storm, and then the subsequent movie. And it's because Starling Lawrence discovered him. So Michael Lewis says, I was 26 years old and still working at Salomon Brothers in finance when I wandered into Norton with a book proposal for a stodgy history of Wall Street. Starr teased out of me a memoir that scandalized Wall Street and made me a persona non grata there for nearly a decade. That's a real writer. You want to be persona non grata. You want to upset the powers that be by telling the truth. Mr. Lawrence, the Times, just say Michael Lewis, just say it. Lewis said, had the quote, storytelling equivalent of perfect pitch. When I sit down to write, the only voice I hear in my head is Starr's. Among the other authors discovered by Sterling Lawrence, David Ignatius, Vincent Bugliosi. I always struggle with his name. He wrote Helter Skelter. Genius. Michael Ondaatje, A.N. Wilson. So David Ignatius says that his editing was occasionally lacerating, but almost always right. Must we? ? He would write next to a phrase he thought was trite. I love that. Must we? Must we? I think we'll adopt that at the Nerve. Must we? In honor of Sterling Lawrence. And then he was asked, he had written books himself, but he knew his real talent was editing. My answer to the question, Sterling said, why do you write? Used to be to keep myself sane, but I'm not so sure that process is working well. My answer now would probably be so that I know what I think about things in relationships between people. I feel that I only really know something through writing about it. I can relate. So rest in peace to Sterling Lawrence, a legend of book publishing and book editing. And there aren't that many like him left, and I can only hope that he serves as inspiration for young up-and-comers. And that's it for today's Nerve. That's it. Oh, our announcement, of course. Our announcement. Okay. Very excited. So on Sunday, September 14th, evening of, you're all invited to our very first live stream. The Nerve is doing our very first live stream in studio with some of your favorite guests. We're going to call them our beloved repeat offenders. We're doing an Emmy night red carpet live stream. Okay. And it's going to be Emmy night coverage like nobody else out there. So come over here. We are going to be talking to you for the first time in real time. We're going to be picking you up on our YouTube channel, on Instagram, X, all socials, and we'll be responding to you right back on air. We're going to announce our guests in a later show. They're all lined up, but we're going to just like give you morsels here and there. This is going to be so fun, and it can't miss. Our very first live Nerve. What should we call it? Will you guys like send me ideas of what you think we should call like the first like Nerve, centralized Nerve? Like, what should we call it? We've got some really fun stuff also coming up in tandem with that. So it's very exciting. So that does it for our Tuesday edition of The Nerve. We will be back again on Friday for our next bout of real talk about fake people. And so we will see you then at The Nerve, where you will never guess what we're about to say next.